welcome to another episode of the Empowered Empaths. I'm Wanda Vitale. I'm a certified life coach. I'm a quantum creation coach. And I am always here to remind you that you are exactly what the world has been waiting for. I want to ask you today if you are coming up against your old patterns. That looks like frustration. That looks like triggers. It looks like things not working out. It looks like people acting out in ways that, that don't serve you. As I'm recording this today, it's the day after the new moon in Scorpio. And right now, a lot of us are being deeply triggered for a couple of reasons. We are headed into an amazing time. Amazing if you've done the inner work. Not so amazing if you're still blaming, projecting, and not taking responsibility for yourself. So when we have these triggers, this is the greater part of you, your soul, the rest of you that's non-physical, saying, hey, you got some beliefs here, or you need to shore up some boundaries. But I want to know if you're using these triggers. Are you feeling them? That is always really all we ever have to do is just feel. I'm an empath, and I remember decades ago when I felt like I was being burned alive because so many intense feelings came up. And it's because when I grew up, my family didn't do feelings. And so as a little kid, there were so many things that happened that I didn't have a framework for. I didn't have somebody to say, hey, it's going to be okay, honey. There was no self-soothing. It was just get on with it because there were other things going on when I grew up. Many of you grew up in families like that. Many of you grew up in families that didn't do feelings, or children were ignored, because that's really the way children used to be treated for generations. Children's emotional well-being was not even a consideration. Right now, if you're being triggered, it's not that you're doing anything wrong, and it's not that somebody else is doing anything to you, but these feelings are coming up so that you can feel them without a story. And I know what it feels like. I just told a client yesterday, it can feel like dying alive because the feelings are so intense. But what do? Most people say, oh no, I'll distract myself. I'll go shop. I'll go think about something else. Or they react. They get angry. But here's what we need to do. We just need to feel the feelings. So if it's fear or if it's anger, be willing to feel anger. Be willing to feel fear and detach from a story around it. When we were little, things came up, intense emotions came up, and we gave it a story. We gave it a meaning because that's how we dealt with things, because we didn't have critical thinking when these triggers were put in place. We didn't have anybody to soothe us. So when a trigger like rage came up, we stuffed it down. And especially if you grew up in a family where you were not allowed to express your feelings, you weren't allowed to be angry. So here's what I want to show you today. Let's call it rage, or if it's fear or anxiety, it doesn't matter really what it is, but it's a feeling. Decide where in the body it is most intense. It may be here, it may be in your heart. Many times it's your heart. It could be your solar plexus. It could be anywhere, and it could move, but put one finger on it. And then just be willing to feel the feeling. When my life collapsed, as I knew it, and I had no idea how I was going to move forward, I was terrified. And so I would let my old friend fear come on down, just take over in my body. And it did feel like being dropped into boiling water. Put your finger on wherever the feeling is most intense, whatever you're feeling. It could be anything. It could be rage, could be self-judgment, it could be anxiety, doubt, fear. Where is it most intense in your body? Put a finger on it and then rate it on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being most intense. Where is it? What is it? And then just be willing to feel the fear, or be willing to feel the unworthiness, whatever the emotion is, without a story attached. Just feel it. Keep your finger there. Get curious about the feeling. Does it have a color in your body? Does it have a shape wherever it's most intense? Does it have a texture? And just be with it. Just be with it. And the feeling will subside. It may take 5 minutes, it may take 15. With some, it may take longer. But the feeling will subside. So much of what's coming up now for people are just these old feelings that we didn't know how to handle, and it's called flooding. So we didn't know how to handle them. So we just said, okay, I don't want to feel this. And we live in a world that intellectualizes emotions, right? Oh, let me tell you a story. Oh, it happened here. It's because I feel this, because every time we go into our head and intellectualize a feeling, we do it because then the feeling doesn't feel so intense. But if you're experiencing some deep triggers now, these feelings are coming up because it's time for them to move. That's what emotions are, feelings in motion. So let yourself feel what's there and understand that when we are no longer triggered, or when we no longer get stuck on these feelings, when we no longer go into story about them, they subside and they move and they disappear. I have not felt fear in years. Since I had my big showdown with fear, when I had my big final surrender, where I really had no choice but to trust life, which is trusting the rest of me, which is soul, fear went away and it just never came back. When I first started this process of letting fear come in and camp out in my body, it came back a few times, but each time it was less and less intense. And then it just doesn't come back. I don't feel fear. Do I contract sometimes? Yes. And I know that when I contract, it's an old decision that I made in life as a child, when I decided that life wasn't safe. And many of you decided that because of the way you grew up. I haven't talked to anybody who was cooed over, who heard things like, you're the best thing that ever happened to our lives. I'm so happy that you're my kid. I'm so proud of you. You're so beautiful and smart and capable. And you're your joy. I haven't talked to anybody like that. And chances are, if you're listening to this, you haven't heard it either. You wouldn't be triggered right now. We are moving into a time on the planet when there will be a massive shift. Duality in 3D will always be there. But we don't have to stay there. We don't have to stay in judgment and fear and worry. We can move into this era that I call the innocent child. Think about a little kid, a little baby who is loved and sees the world in wonder. When we make this shift into becoming who we really are, which is really we're a soul dressed up in the disguise as a human, life is that way. It's full of wonder and possibility. We don't expect the worst, we expect the best, and the best shows up. So that's really what we're moving into. We have the ability to do that. And many of you who are listening to this are part of this transition team for this new world that many of you call 5D. It's the Christ consciousness. It's the energy of the innocent child. And in order to go there, to live there and embody this, we need to move these emotions that keep us stuck in blame, in unforgiveness, in resentment. So if you're being triggered now, just look at what's going on. What story are you telling? Are you blaming someone? Or are you saying, okay, this is a gift, and I'm finally going to feel what I couldn't feel when I was little. And I'm going to parent that part of me and just love that part of me back into wholeness. So try this. This is one of the processes I use with clients who get stuck because it works. Ultimately, we're here to sit in the center of the quantum field as all that is, choosing what would I prefer. We're here to say yes to some things that resonate with us and to say no to the things that don't. It's not judgment, it's discernment. It's realizing that nothing is inherently negative. It's just a choice. And we are the chooser of our thoughts, of our reality. It all stems from an identity that we're being. And we get to choose who that is based on what we want in our lives. So if you're being triggered now, use it. It's a gift. It's pointing you back to decisions that you made or stories that you absorbed when you were tiny. And they may not be stories that serve you, like life isn't safe, life is hard, I don't count. We all have these stories, but the good news is they're just stories. Try this process with putting a finger on wherever the feeling is most intense. And I can assure you that if you go back to this when you're triggered, feel the feeling, detach from the story, then actually decide when the feeling has calmed down, decide, what would I prefer instead of this? What story would I prefer? Because our lives are the results of just a bunch of stories that we tell that are based on what we learned when we were little, or what we picked up, or what the stories that were passed down from our ancestors. And when we start to tell a new story and to say no to the old stories that come up, we change our lives. Change is always from within, not from without. Always from within. Everything in your life right now and in the world is a reflection of the stories we're telling. And in the world, it's a reflection of the projections of everybody on the planet. Let me know how this works for you and if this is helpful. Thanks for listening. And if you haven't hit subscribe, do that. I'm a coach. I'm here to remind you that everything is possible and that you are here for a reason. And you're not too old, too young, too sensitive, or not enough. Those are just stories. If your presence wasn't required in this big shift that humanity is making, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't have decided to show up. Follow your dreams.